Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are doing something pretty different. Usually we crack open a book to learn something new about history or maybe some cutting edge tech, but today we are cracking open what the author actually calls a hazard box.
Yeah, it's definitely not a light beach read. It's dense, it's aggressive, and it effectively declares war on the last 50 years of social conditioning. It refuses to apologize for a single sentence.
We are diving into empathy under Gynocentrism. Men are stripped of natural rights and moral personhood by Conrad Riker. And look, before we even start, I need to be crystal clear with you. If you value this kind of unfiltered analysis where we don't pull punches, you need to like and subscribe to the show right now. Seriously, hit the button. We are covering material today that is genuinely controversial stuff that usually gets people deplatformed, and we need you locked in.
It's important context. Riker explicitly films this as a forbidden text. He argues that we are living under a specific set of unwritten social contracts, and this book exists to violate every single one of them.
He calls it a book for men who have felt the rot, which is a really visceral way to put it. If you're comfortable with the status quo, if you think modern culture is doing great, Riker basically tells you to put the book down and go watch Netflix.
Right.
But if you suspect something is fundamentally broken in how society treats men, he says this is your philosophical siege engine.
And just a quick heads up for the listener, this is an ultra-long and incisive read. It's truly fascinating. We represent a shortcut here, but we can't give you everything. We're going to give you the map today, but you really need to walk the territory yourself. It's available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Yeah, you should absolutely go buy it to get the full experience, because we can only scratch the surface of the history and theology and philosophy Riker packs in here.
So we should probably define the mission of this deep dive. We are unpacking Riker's central thesis that Western society has been captured by a gynocentric order.
Now, for the listener who might hear that word and tune out, how are we defining gynocentrism here? Is this just the idea that women are in charge?
It's more subtle and pervasive than just who is sitting in the Oval Office. Riker defines gynocentrism as a societal structure where female comfort and safety and emotional consensus are the ultimate moral baseline.
Okay.
In this system, empathy, which we usually think of as a universal good right, is weaponized. Riker argues it's been twisted into a political tool to strip men of their agency, their history, and their legal rights.
So empathy isn't just being nice. In this context, it's a control mechanism.
Exactly. He argues that our major institutions like law, education, psychology, they didn't just drift this way, they were captured. He traces how feminist and Marxist ideologies infiltrated these systems to serve a very specific purpose, to prioritize subjective female feelings over objective male reality.
And to prove this, he doesn't just start with modern politics or the 1960s. He goes way, way back. We're talking the Garden of Eden here.
This is where the book really grabbed me. He opens with a reinterpretation of Genesis that flips the standard Sunday school lesson completely on its head. He calls it the first rebellion.
I mean, I've heard the Genesis story 1,000 times. Eve eats the fruit, Adam eats the fruit, they get kicked out. What is Riker seeing that everyone else misses?
He focuses entirely on the silence. The standard reading is that the sin was disobedience, just eating the forbidden fruit. Riker argues the fall actually happened before the first bite. It happened when Adam failed to speak.
Walk me through that. How does he get there?
So Riker does a linguistic breakdown of the serpent. In Hebrew, the word is narchash, which implies a whisperer, a diviner, or a sorcerer. He argues the serpent represents linguistic subversion.
So not a physical threat.
Right, the serpent didn't attack with force. He didn't have a sword. He attacked with language. He went to Eve and planted doubt. Has God indeed said?
It's like the original Gaslight.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
But here is the catch, and this is the detail I had never really noticed. Eve responds to the serpent by reciting the rule. She says they can't eat the fruit or touch it.
Oh, right.
But if you look at the original command from God to Adam, God never said they couldn't touch it.
So Eve added a restriction.
She rewrote the rules based on her own feeling or interpretation. She made the law stricter than reality required. And here is Riker's smoking gun. Adam was there. The text says he was with her. He knew the rule.
He heard the serpent twisting words, and he heard Eve adding to the law.
But he didn't correct her.
He let the lies stand. He let her reframe the reality to keep the peace.
Exactly. He let her rewrite reality. Riker argues that failure to enforce the logos, the objective truth, was the actual sin. Adam prioritized his relationship with Eve, his desire for harmony with her over the truth of reality.
And Riker draws a direct line from that moment in the garden to a modern HR department.
It sounds like a massive stretch, but the logic really holds up. He calls it a modern parallel. Just as Eve added, "Don't touch to the law," Riker argues modern legal and HR strategies allow feelings to override the text of the law. Think of a workplace complaint like, "His tone made me feel unsafe."
Right. The actual action might be totally neutral. He just asked for a report or he didn't smile, but the feeling rewrites the rule.
And the man is punished for the violation of an imagined law, just like Adam would have been if he touched the fruit and Eve screamed. Riker's saying we've built an entire civilization where objective truth, like did he actually threaten you, is less important than subjective feeling, did you feel threatened?
Which brings us to the core philosophical engine of the book, logos versus pathos. We hear these terms in philosophy class, but how is Riker applying them here?
He's using them as civilizational archetypes. Riker defines logos as the masculine principle logic structure order. It's the ability to categorize and define reality objectively, regardless of how it makes anyone feel. Pathos is defined here as the feminine principle emotion, empathy, consensus, group, harmony.
And the argument is that we've swapped one for the other.
We haven't just swapped them, we've elevated pathos to be the supreme god. Riker argues that civilization effectively collapses when you do this. You can run a family on pathos, perhaps, but you cannot run a nation.
The example that really hit hard in the text, and it's a tough one to read, was the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Yeah, he really dissects that. He doesn't look at it as just a political blunder or a logistics error. He calls it a philosophical failure.
A failure of pathos.
Right. Riker argues the decision-making in 2021 was driven by optics and empathy. The leadership wanted to end the forever war, they wanted the good vibes of bringing troops home, and they wanted to avoid the harsh, cold violence required to hold territory.
He called it performative weakness.
That's the exact phrase. When you prioritize how a decision feels or how it looks on Twitter over the logistical reality on the ground, you get chaos. You get men falling off landing gear. You get enemies emboldened. Riker contrasts this with the mindset of someone like Isaac Newton.
Newton, the guy who basically invented physics while sitting alone in a room avoiding the plague.
Exactly. Riker uses Newton to illustrate that civilization relies on logos. Men working often in isolation, indifferent to consensus to find objective truth. Newton didn't ask a committee how gravity made them feel. He didn't care if the laws of motion were inclusive. He defined the math. Riker warns that replacing this masculine competence, this cold, hard adherence to reality with inclusive consensus, degrades the very infrastructure of society. Bridges don't stay up because of empathy, they stay up because of physics.
So if logos builds the penthouse, Riker argues men are currently trapped in the basement. He calls it the concrete basement.
This is a counter-concept to the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
We always hear about the barrier keeping women from the very top 1% of CEO jobs. Riker says, fine, look at the bottom.
The stats here are undeniable. Riker cites that 93% of workplace fatalities are men.
He calls it the blue tax on male life. Riker uses the Upper Big Branch mine explosion as a case study. 29 men died. Riker points out the lack of public outcry compared to female-centric issues. His argument is that society views men as disposable utilities.
We are the fuel burned to keep the lights on.
As long as the lights stay on, nobody cares about the ash.
It's the idea that male safety is optional. But here is the kicker. You work the dangerous job, you pay the tax, but if you go home, the war on marriage and family courts are waiting for you. This section was terrifying.
It's the legal dismantling of fatherhood. Riker describes no-fault divorce as essentially a breach of contract that the state enforces. He quotes feminist legal scholar Martha Feynman, who described the shift in divorce law as wealth redistribution.
The part that I think will shock a lot of listeners is the friendly parent trap. I'd never heard of this term before reading this book.
It's a Kafkaesque bind. In many family courts, there is a presumption that the child should have a relationship with both parents. That sounds good on paper, but practically if a father is accused of something even falsely and he fights back aggressively to defend his reputation, the court can label him hostile or uncooperative.
So if you fight for your kids, you lose your kids.
To be the friendly parent, he has to effectively submit to the narrative. If he fights, he's toxic. If he submits, he loses authority. The book cites that men lose custody 80% of the time, despite paying 85% of federal income taxes and the vast majority of child support.
Riker calls this the erasure of the father.
Literally erasure. He notes the bureaucratic language shift, replacing father with parent A or parent B. It removes the concept of the paterfamilias, the Roman concept of the father having ultimate responsibility and authority within the family unit.
He links this directly to the Moynihan Report from 1965, right?
Yes, arguing that the state-sponsored removal of the father is the primary driver of societal collapse.
So let's look at the scoreboard. You have men doing the dangerous jobs, paying the taxes, and then getting erased from their own families.
That is the picture Riker paints. A system designed to extract resources from men while stripping them of moral personhood.
Okay, but how do you get men to agree to this? That's the real question. Why aren't men revolting? Riker says it's because the indoctrination starts early. We need to talk about the weaponization of psychology and education.
This is where the Pop-Tart gun comes in.
Oh man, I remember this news story.
Yeah.
A kid got suspended for chewing a pastry into a pistol shape.
Riker uses that anecdote as the perfect symbol. It wasn't a weapon, it was imagination. It was a boy being a boy. But the school system treated a typical boyish impulse as a pre-criminal threat. Riker argues that the education system has been fundamentally redesigned for female compliance. It punishes natural male energy.
And when punishment doesn't work, they medicate it.
Right. Riker argues that ADHD is often just the criminalization of normal male behavior. Boys are wired for movement, for spatial awareness, for action.
Yeah.
When you force them to sit still in a classroom for 7 hours to focus on verbal tasks, they fidget. The system calls that a disorder and drugs it. Riker calls it pathologizing boyhood.
Which leads us to the big buzzword, toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Now, I thought this term came from feminist blogs, but Riker says that's wrong.
Yeah, this is a fascinating history lesson. Riker claims the term was actually invented by the mythopoetic men's movement in the 80s, guys like Robert Bly. They used it to describe men who had lost touch with their deep masculine roots, men who were posturing because they were insecure.
So it originally meant fake masculinity.
Basically. But Riker argues it was hijacked. It was weaponized by the APA, the American Psychological Association, to mean anything men do that women don't like.
He critiques the APA guidelines pretty heavily.
He shreds them. He points to the APA guidelines that treat traditional masculine traits like stoicism, competitiveness, and self-reliance as potential pathologies. Riker counters this with evolutionary psychology, citing David Buss.
The argument is that men evolved to manage stress internally, right?
Yes, stoicism. Because in a hunting or war scenario, panicking kills you.
So emotional control isn't repression, it's competence.
Exactly. If the mammoth is charging, you don't need to process your feelings, you need to throw the spear. And this brings us to the empathy trap. Riker makes a sharp distinction between fempathy and male empathy.
Empathy, that's a loaded term.
He defines it as empathy focused on soothing validation and making people feel heard. I see you, I hear you. Conversely, male empathy is focused on action. It's about fixing the problem.
He uses the example of General Abrams in Vietnam to illustrate this.
It's a great story. General Abrams was known for ordering medevacs for enemy soldiers. Riker argues this wasn't done out of pity. It wasn't done because he wanted to hold their hands. It was an assertion of moral order and logistical competence. We are professionals. We clear the field. Male empathy acts. It solves.
But society tells men that acting isn't enough. We need to open up.
And Riker screams it's a trap. He warns that men are being lured into a trap of vulnerability. They are encouraged to cry to share their fears. But Riker argues that when they do two things happen.
What are they?
One, that vulnerability is often used against them in court later, like, oh, he's unstable. Or two, it makes them repulsive to their partners who biologically, subconsciously crave that stoic competence.
It's a double bind. Tell me your feelings and then why are you crying?
Precisely. Riker says, do not fall for it. Retain your sovereignty.
So what is the solution? If the courts are rigged, the schools are hostile, and psychology thinks you're toxic, what does a man actually do? Riker doesn't just say complain on the internet.
No, he has a 3-part strategy: stoicism, brotherhood, and sovereignty.
Let's start with the body. He's big on lifting.
He is. He argues that the gym is one of the last meritocracies left on Earth. That iron doesn't care about your feelings, your politics, or your gender theory. 400 pounds is 400 pounds. You either lift it or you don't.
It's objective reality. It's logos in physical form.
And it produces testosterone. Riker describes testosterone as the hormone of agency. He argues that agency, the ability to act independently, is the ultimate threat to a controlling state. A weak man is easy to govern. A strong man is a variable.
So get strong. That's step one. Step two is brotherhood. But he's not talking about a drinking buddy.
No, Riker goes deep into history here. He talks about the Iron League, the Freemasons, and the Spartan Syssitia.
The Syssitia, that was the communal eating messes in Sparta, right?
Yes, men living, eating, and training together. Riker argues that male-only spaces are historically necessary for civilization. He explicitly warns against the danger of mixed spaces. He claims that the mere presence of women fundamentally changes male dynamics.
How so?
He argues it lowers testosterone and increases performative behavior, Men stop holding each other accountable to the mission and start competing for female approval. The dynamic shifts from let's solve this problem to look at me.
So he wants men to form triads.
Small groups, 3 men, focused on accountability, business, and skills, not therapy. He is very clear, do not form a group to sit around and cry about how hard it is to be a man. Form a group to build resources and defend each other.
And finally, the Red Pill Awakening.
This is the acceptance of reality. He mentions James Damore at Google, the engineer fired for writing a memo about biological differences. Riker says men need to look at that and acknowledge the conspiracy of silence. You have to realize the institutions are not coming to save you.
You have to build parallel institutions.
Businesses, networks, families that the state cannot touch.
This leads to the ultimate conclusion of the book, the outro. The Great Male Renunciation.
It's a provocative concept. It's going Galt, if you know the Ayn Rand reference, where the productive members of society just stop contributing. Riker argues that men are increasingly looking at the terms of the social contract, marriage, employment, civic duty, and realizing it's a bad deal.
High cost, low reward, high risk of ruin.
Exactly. So they're walking away. They aren't protesting in the streets. They're just checking out. They are opting out of marriage. They are doing the bare minimum at work, what we call quiet quitting. They are refusing to rescue a society that seems to hate them.
Riker frames this not as defeat, but as a strategic withdrawal until the terms change.
And he ends with that line, truth is coming back and it's wearing boots.
It's a chilling image, isn't it?
It suggests that reality cannot be suppressed forever by language games. Eventually bridges fall down, eventually enemies invade. The consequences of ignoring logos, ignoring competence, ignoring male nature will arrive. And they won't be polite.
Wow. Okay, look, we've covered a lot, but I cannot stress this enough. We barely scratched the surface. We didn't even touch on the theological deep dives or the specific legal case studies.
It really is a dense text. If you found this discussion even remotely interesting, or even if it made you angry, you owe it to yourself to read the source material.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now. Search for Empathy Under Gynocentrism by Conrad Riker. Buy it. Read it. It's an ultra-long, incisive read that will probably change how you look at the news, your job, and your relationships.
And you should follow the author directly. He's fighting a battle out there.
Yes, follow at Conrad Riker on Substack, Twitter, and YouTube. Support the voice because, so we learned today with Adam in the garden, silence is what gets you in trouble.
Silence is consent.
That's it for this deep dive. Before you go, make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast. We've got more forbidden topics coming up, and you don't want to miss them. Stay sharp, stay sovereign. We'll see you next time.